afternoon and welcome to a special edition of Tracking the Tropics. I'm CBS 17 Chief Meteorologist Wes Hohenstein in Raleigh, North Carolina. And for the 6th year in a row, we have a named tropical system before the season officially starts on June 1st. And it has been a windy, wet day out at the Frying Pan Tower. This is an old Coast Guard light station located about 34 miles off the coast of North Carolina, and this is a live look from there today. Let's get you the very latest on Tropical Storm Arthur. It came together over the weekend, of course, as Tropical Depression 1, this a few weeks before the season even starts. On Sunday, it became Tropical Storm Arthur, and over the course of the last 24 hours, it's made itself north, just adjacent to the East Coast, up off of the South Carolina and North Carolina coast. Earlier today, coming within about 50 miles of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. It has always remained a lopsided storm, meaning the center of the storm has most of the activity east of it, and west of it, where we are on the East Coast, has remained relatively calm. Although we'll find out in a few minutes as we go live to the coast, there are still some pretty ugly weather conditions with wind and rain. So the very latest from the National Hurricane Center, as the system is now moving northeast at 16 miles per hour. It was moving northeast there for a while. Winds are at 50 miles per hour, the strongest it has been in its lifetime, with gusts up to 65 miles per hour, and the pressure holding at 993 millibars. Remember, we keep an eye on the pressure because when the pressure starts to go up, higher pressure, that means the storm is weakening. When we see pressure going down throughout the hurricane season in a tropical system, we know that the system is getting stronger. So right now, the system will start to weaken as it continues to push off to the northeast, but it is still bringing some rain and gusty winds to our friends along the coast. You can see Norfolk down through Elizabeth City, most of the Outer Banks getting hit with some rain from Tropical Storm Arthur. And again, it's hard to pick out a well-defined eye, but as you look at the satellite and radar over the past couple of hours, you can see there's a little bit of a central swirl, and that central swirl is about 50 miles east of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. The wind gusts at their peak were in excess of 40 miles per hour. That was just earlier today, but our current wind gusts along the coast, as those winds are really howling out of the north. Again, there's the eye of the storm, about 50 miles east of the coast of North Carolina. We're seeing 20 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts. So still some strong winds, even though this is a weak and disorganized tropical storm. The Hurricane Hunter aircraft, they've been active the past 36 hours. They are just now heading back, which will most likely be their last flight into Tropical Storm Arthur as this system moves northeast. You can see they're in there getting the latest information, not only going through the center of this storm once, but several times. The more information they can gather and send back to meteorologists all over the world, the better job we can all do and computer models can do about forecasting exactly where this storm goes. And that becomes important when we're trying to warn people about who needs to take heed and how to plan for an approaching tropical system. So the latest track from the National Hurricane Center, again, the storm has 50 mile per hour winds moving northeast at 16. That's new information just in the past hour, but it'll continue to move northeast and then eventually east away from the United States, picking up speed as it does. And by later tonight, Monday night at 8 o'clock, we're expecting it to be more than 100 miles off the coast of North Carolina and then kind of turn into a subtropical remnant low as it continues to still have some windy conditions, but moving farther and farther out to sea. So that's what's going on with the meteorology of the system. Let's find out what's going on with our eyes and the conditions on the beach. So right now we're going to bring in WAVY reporter Andy Fox, who is live in Merlot Beach, North Carolina this afternoon. Andy, tell us what you've seen since arriving on the coast.
Wes, I came on your show, and it's amazing. I was coming on your show to tell you it's no big deal. Nothing big has happened. As soon as you started the show, everything started to deteriorate out here. We have really 35, 40 mile per hour gusting winds. We're getting a lot of the sand coming in. I was going to show you something in the distance, which is a new bridge that's being constructed, but the weather has deteriorated so much I don't even want to put the camera in that direction. Let me show you what it looked like when we were coming in here. We were coming in on Highway 12 heading south, and we had a lot of overwash. You see the overwash there, and it happens all the time. I was going to show you the new jug handle bridge that is being constructed here that will bypass this area that always has overwash. We are expecting somewhere between 1 and 2 feet of storm surge coming in. And just recently, we've started having all this rain pickup and also the gusting winds. Coming back here alive, you can see that the surf out here is really looking nasty. We do have a very strong rip current warning in effect. Wes had a situation yesterday where a heroic guy driving along hears 2 people out screaming, races out there, runs in, swims out there, brings them back in. They walk away alive. But, Wes, that's the latest from here. Right as you started the show, everything started to deteriorate out here, and we're now getting a lot of these westerly winds coming in here. That's the latest from the Outer Banks. Wes, back to you.
Andy, I don't know if you can still hear me. You know, we're in a pandemic, and you've been covering these storms on the coast for more than 30 years. So you've never covered a storm in a pandemic. Can you tell any difference? I know it's a Monday afternoon, but is there anything different now?
Yeah, a lot of masks. People are wearing a lot of masks. That's an excellent question. We were down on Highway 12 in Salvo. We were stopping cars as they were coming around. You know, we're finally allowing visitors out here. We have the pandemic, and then a guy described it as the icing on the cake that we now have a tropical storm, Arthur, coming in. So everyone's kind of dealing with this, trying to get back open, and then we had this. But we're hoping that for Memorial Day weekend, next weekend, everything's going to be fantastic. But I'll tell you, I don't know what kind of clout you had there, Wes, but as soon as you started this show, everything deteriorated.
Well, I'll tell you this, I have absolutely zero clout, but occasionally we can track a storm together. Andy Fox, stay safe. Unfortunately, I know we'll be talking with you throughout the hurricane season. Of course, the North Carolina coast is no stranger to big storms. These big storms bring big waves and sometimes big crowds. We continue our Tracking the Tropics show in Wilmington with CBS 17's Holden Kerwicki.
After being hit hard by Hurricanes Florence and Dorian the last 2 years, many Wrightsville Beach residents were concerned watching the swells rise Sunday afternoon. But as the sun rose Monday morning, they found out that Tropical Storm Arthur stayed out to sea.
I thought it would be a little more dramatic since it was offshore, but, you know, kicking up some good waves, especially yesterday. But that's okay. You know, since I do live here, it's nice not to have to worry about anything happening to the house.
Amy Purdy was one of the first Wrightsville Beach residents to hit the sand, looking for the spoils left behind by the storm.
I came out here just take a look. Sometimes you find shark's teeth and everything afterwards, so I was out looking for that, hoping to find a few.
As Purdy searched the sand, surfers like Jeff Piles tried to take advantage of the swells associated with the tropical storm.
Yeah, I was probably expecting it to be a little bit better than it is, but you know, any waves are better than no waves.
We are supposed to have an active hurricane season, but you never know what it's going to be like, and we've had a few, actually a number of ones hit Wilmington over the years, and you just need to be safe and take precautions and do the right thing.
Of course, hurricane season doesn't start until June 1st, and as more storms start to build, CBS 17 will be here on air and online. In Wrightsville Beach, Holden Kerwicki, CBS 17 News.
All right, let's go up the road from where he is in Wrightsville Beach to a live look at North Topsail. And are you sure there's a tropical system? Did you see all the people on the fishing pier? There's a few people on the beach. We've got a little bit of sun breaking through. So remember, the center of the storm is about, I'd say, 80 miles from this point off to the northeast. So slightly different conditions there from where we talked to our 2 reporters so far on this special edition of Tracking the Tropics. All right, from Raleigh, North Carolina, let's go to eastern North Carolina, back to the coast, and go to Greenville and check in with WNCT Chief Meteorologist Jerry Jackson. Jerry, I don't want to start off on a bad note here, but I saw enough of you last year with all the storms we had, and now I'm talking to you in May 2020. What's been going on in eastern North Carolina?
I tell you, Wes, we need to at least wait till, late July or early August before we start talking about this mess again. But at least, though, this system is certainly going to pale by comparison to some of our other storms, such as Dorian or Florence or Matthew of the past few years. So that much, at least, is very good news. Let's take a look at our live I-9 camera. This is situated out at the Atlantic Beach area now. And as you take a look, you can see actually some people standing out there along the coast from time to time. We still want to urge folks to remember that there is a very very high rip current risk all up and down the coast, and that's going to continue to persist and be a problem even during the nighttime hours tonight as Arthur continues to pull away. This is kind of an overview from our friends over at the National Weather Service office in Morehead City of the rainfall distribution there. You see the oranges and yellows indicating the heavier totals, which, as common sense would dictate, actually occurred a little bit closer to the coast. Now, these are some of the unofficial wind peak gusts, and a lot of these were recorded through about, well, just before lunchtime or so today. We'll have a more revised set of numbers coming in to see if anything exceeded these gusts in some of these locations during the early part of the afternoon. But you get the general idea, up around 50 miles an hour, some of those peak wind gusts in coastal locations. The rainfall has been impressive, but on order with general forecast out there. We were thinking we'd get up to about 4 inches or so, with a few isolated pockets a little higher than that. Cape Carteret, as late as mid-morning this morning, had already picked up just over 5 inches of rainfall. Newport 4.47. Yet once you travel farther inland away from the coast, it was a fairly sharp cutoff as far as those rainfall totals are concerned. Some of our western counties over towards Wayne and parts of Duplin County, they saw much lower overall rainfall totals. And you can clearly see the back edge of the precipitation shield of Arthur now beginning to pull out of here as the center of circulation slowly pulling its way away. And we're probably going to notice a little uptick in the forward momentum there as it gets booted out to sea by some incoming disturbances. Currently here in Greenville, we're actually in the 70s. Our dew point's in the 60s, but where you're closer to the center of the circulation, a little farther to the north, you see that stronger northeast wind influence holding temperatures in the 60s in places like Elizabeth City and up around Kill Devil Hills. And here's our current wind field out there. Winds generally coming out of the northwest depending on location. And again, you still see some decent gusts around 20-30 miles an hour over towards Hatteras and also Kill Devil Hills too. So still blustery. This is an interesting view because you can see Arthur clearly there at the coast, but if you look out towards the mountains, you see some of the systems that are helping to push Arthur out to sea. There's actually a low pressure trough, a couple of cold fronts, several different boundaries that we're going to be tracking, and also a pinwheel area of low pressure that's going to set up and almost stall over the next couple of days. And we're going to kind of be in the wheelhouse for a plume of moisture coming up out of the Gulf of Mexico here. So the interesting thing for our inland counties is that we're probably going to see more rain out of these disturbances coming in for areas away from the coast than we actually got from Arthur. Now, obviously, the totals along the coast and out towards the Outer Banks from Arthur were obviously higher there, but you see that big plume of moisture now beginning to gather from Florida all the way up into South Carolina. That's a non-tropical storm system. That's not a tropical storm or hurricane, thankfully, but it is going to be a big rainmaker for parts of the state. And Wes, one thing I know just from an agricultural standpoint, kind of a tricky time of the year for some of the area farmers in eastern North Carolina, especially with corn crops. Corn crops really susceptible to prolonged periods of dry weather or excessively hot temperature readings. So we were really needing some rain for our inland locations, and hopefully we'll get some much needed rain from that system to the west. The coast, on the other hand, has seen a little bit too much rain in a short space in time this morning. Hopefully they'll get a few hours break anyway before some more showers overspread later tonight. But that's the way it goes sometimes. The tropics get off to an early season, as we're seeing outside today.
Yeah, and Arthur stealing the headlines, but as you mentioned, you know, this rain coming the rest of the week is probably going to be the bigger impact. I'm going to ask you the same question I just asked our reporter on the coast. First time covering a tropical system during a pandemic. Have you noticed anything around the coast that feels or looks a little different this time around?
Well, you know, I think everything kind of feels and looks different. I mean, even to the point here in Greenville, we're, you know, far away from the coast, but you still see parking lots not quite as full as they were before, depending on location. You know, everyone has already been through so much mentally. Just with the COVID situation, to even have to think about putting up, you know, tropical storm warnings, even though this system nowhere near as strong as something like a Dorian, a Florence, or a Matthew. But you do get a certain amount of mental fatigue, I guess is a way you could put it, whenever you throw something else there into the mix. But maybe we'll get a little bit of a break, at least as far as the tropics are concerned, for a little while until we really truly get into the heart of the season. We'll see how it goes.
Yep, here's hoping, and let's hope we can enjoy the great beaches here on the East Coast. That's Jerry Jackson. Good to see you from WNCT in Greenville, North Carolina. We'll be talking to him throughout the season. Unfortunately, you know how it's going to go this year. As we've mentioned, North Carolina is no stranger to hurricanes, and the time to prepare is now. NC State researchers here in Raleigh, North Carolina, believe it will be an above-average hurricane season with 3 to 5 major hurricanes. So we need to remind ourselves this is a great time to come up with our family plan. What are you going to do in your house if a hurricane is threatening your area? Make sure you have the supplies. Make sure you have enough water and non-perishable food to last you at least a week. Make sure your medications are going to be ready to go. You can have an opportunity to refill those when the time comes. And you know what happens a lot in the Carolinas? We lose power. So batteries, chargers, make sure you have a way to get a hold of some cash, because cash will be king when power is out around town, and your important documents. Now's also a good time to check your insurance policy. If you haven't done that in a year or so, make sure your coverage is updated for tropical systems, for flooding, for wind, and if you're on the coast, for storm surge. Now, the official start of the hurricane season isn't for a few more weeks, we've mentioned. But as meteorologist Brian Hutton Jr. tell us, an early storm isn't really that unusual.
Anna, Alex, Bonnie, Arlene, Alberto, Andrea, and Arthur. Tropical Storm Arthur, the first storm of the 2020 season, became the 7th storm in the last 6 years to form prior to the start of hurricane season on June 1st. In fact, since 2000, 13 storms have formed in April or May. Early season storms are nothing new, as 52 storms have formed in the month of May in recorded history. This number accounts for more than half of the number of storms to form outside of hurricane season. Storms that form this early usually develop in similar locations to June systems, in the Western Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, or Southwest Atlantic near the Bahamas. Early season storms do not translate to a more active year. Since 2000, 10 seasons, omitting this one, have featured a storm prior to the season beginning, with an average number of storms in those years of 15.1. In the same span, the average number of storms per season is 15.3, although that number is skewed slightly by the record-breaking 2005 season. With these numbers, years with an early storm have seen above normal activity 6 times, normal activity 2 times, and below normal activity 2 times. This season is expected to be an above-average year for tropical systems, but this early start does not necessarily mean the year will end busy. Meteorologist Brian Hutton Jr., CBS 17 News.
Okay, Brian, so Arthur is checked off the list. Here is the full list of names for the 2020 Atlantic side hurricane season. Next up on the list, and by the way, there is nothing else out there brewing right now in the tropics, is Bertha. Then we go on to Cristobal, Dolly, Eduard, Faye, Gonzalo. Again, there's the list from the National Hurricane Center, the 2020 Atlantic hurricane storm season. So as we mentioned just a few minutes ago, while the headlines this week are going to be grabbed by Arthur, the bigger impactful weather will be from another system coming from the west. Over the next few days, that could bring several inches of rain to the mid-Atlantic, including 4 to 5 inches up in the mountains through the Triad of North Carolina, with another couple of inches possible for central North Carolina and along the coast. So during this time over the next few days, I know we're all looking forward and ahead to the holiday weekend. Stay safe, as more rain, possibly some severe weather, will be with us in the next few days. So I want to thank you, for everyone involved today, for spending some time with us on this special edition of Tracking the Tropics. We will be here throughout the entire Atlantic hurricane season every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, keeping you informed. Live in Raleigh, North Carolina, I'm CBS 17 Chief Meteorologist Wes Hohenstein.